Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Asus TUF X299 board, or as I would personally call it, the Asus X299 Sabertooth. Anyway, this is the Mark 1 board. It's the one with the shroud. It's the one that we're kind of used to, being the Sabertooth with all the extra stuff. Although it's not really got like the military theme or anything that it used to have. It's kind of more of a kind of understated sort of grey and stuff like that. But one of the reasons why I'm particularly interested in taking a look at this is that shroud. And if I'm honest, it's that shroud, and to see if there are any implications that it may have a detrimental effect on the VRM temps. So I've spent a lot of time looking at the VRMs. We've added an awful lot of individual testing to be able to give some very different scenarios for the VRM load, to the point that we're running 5 tests on 2 different overclocks, as well as all of our normal tests. But right at the very beginning, what I will say is, if you would like to go and see any of the other tests that are not featured in this video, then you can go to the OC3D website. The link is always underneath, and you can go there if you'd like to look at any of the other graphs, where with this specific one comparing the other X299 boards that we've done up to date. But okay, so for a good scan around the board, I've got the covers fitted that come in the box. The M.2 that's here does fit up to a 80mm drive. I have tested it as well, and we'll talk to you about it in the actual testing part itself. But there's a thermal pad on the back of it, takes up to an 80mm M.2, so that's the normal length M.2s. Like I said, there's a thermal pad on the back of it. I've actually done all my testing, so that's why the plastic cover is not on it. But there is another M.2 mount down at the bottom, and yes, it's a vertical one. And it does up to 110mm, and you can just screw the little bracket in so that you can fit it. You may think that it would be annoying, but I actually run one on one of the other boards that mounts up here, and you do get used to it quite quickly, but it's all down to kind of personal preference. What it also does do is it shows that you've got access to the battery here, which can ping out and you can get it in. It can be a little bit fiddly. It's definitely easier when the board is free to be able to do it. If it's in a case, it can be a little bit of a pain in the bottom to be able to get in and out, but you can do it. Sometimes magnets are wonderful things, or little screwdrivers and stuff to be able to get in there. Fan connectors, you've got 4 across the top, 1 CPU, then you've got CPU optional, a chassis fan, and then the assist fan. You've got 2 more fans down here, another one nestled just in underneath the screw mount up there, and then there's another pair down the bottom. You do get a power switch down the bottom as well. Only 1 USB 2. If you need more USB 2s for things like your AIO or your power supplies and that sort of stuff, then don't forget you can get USB 2 hubs. You can even get cables that go from this USB 3 into 2 USB 2s as well for like 99p on eBay, so that's something else that you can keep in mind. You've got another horizontal USB 3 up here, USB 3.1. The little lights that you may have got used to on the board that show you when your CPU and your RAM and stuff is going through the post, they're up here just hidden behind the plastic, but you can see them quite easily. Little fan here. It's actually, when we get to the bit a little bit later where you see this built in a system, it's pretty much, if you think about it, absolutely hidden by a graphics card, because these 2 slots are going to be taken up by a graphics card. So as you can see, it's pretty much covered up by the graphics card itself. And while we're talking about graphics card, the thing that I grabbed hold of was the graphics card support. I think this is amazing. I actually think that graphics card manufacturers should start utilising these. You'll see in a bit later on, should start sending these out with cards, but also utilising the design into these as well, so that these become a part of the graphics card looking design. Anyway, I really like that. I think it's a very clever thing to have put in the box. Other thing to talk about when we kind of go around the back is you've got plenty of connections, BIOS clear button, all the normal kind of mumbo jumbo. Couple of gigabit Ethernets, no wireless or anything like that, but they do send a separate USB based. this is a Bluetooth dongle, and this is so that you can hook your phone up, because there is a an app, so that basically, like the stuff that you can see in AI Suite, you can use remotely on your phone. So if you're mid-game or something, you may have gone back to the lobby or something in between like a match, and if you wanted to turn your fan speeds up or check your temperatures or anything like that, you can do that all through the app. It's not particularly a new thing, I would say. It's new for Asus, but it's not particularly new for the market. The only other thing that I'd like to draw attention to, more than anything else, you can see the amount of SATAs around the side there, is the fact that we do have this plastic cover. Yes, it goes all the way around the board, but it's the plastic cover, and it does go over our VRM cooler. Now, I've spent a lot of time, because don't forget I've said that I've already tested, I spent a lot of time adding in tests for VRMs that we're going to cover a little bit later on. And the only other thing that's in the box, and this code can only be used once, and you have to be very quick about it, and if you do use it, I would love you to post about it on the OC3D forums, or tweet me, or tag me on Instagram or something like that, is this cable mod code. So if you're thinking about getting yourself some cable mod cables, that will give you 20% off, courtesy of moi. So good luck with that, peeps. So this is our motherboard test rig. It's the Corsair 540 Air. The graphics that are on it are just custom made decals. Anyway, when we do our stock tests, what we do is we turn off speed step and the C states, and we install 3200 megahertz memory, enable XMP. We don't enable the, there's some things that they can do to basically, it's a setting in the BIOS to, it kind of sets the CPUs up a little bit differently. We always turn no on that, because on some of the Asus boards, it can be a positive thing. On some of the Asus boards, it can actually be a negative thing. So we just disable it. I think it's core enhancement or something. But anyway, we always turn that off. But with the overclock tests, 4.6 gigahertz, 1.235 volts, and especially with the Prime 28 and V28 and V29, that does then mean that it creates an immense amount of heat. The CPU can be at 110 degrees in seconds, even with this 280mm AIO, with the fans absolutely maxed out, because the amount of load that goes onto the CPU at that point is absolutely monstrous. The other nice thing, while we're here, that we can show you is in the box you do get this GPU support, and I actually think it's kind of nice, although I have tried setting it up differently. I think it's just the screws. The end of mine isn't touching the graphics card. Like I said, I think I just need to undo the screws or use a different screw, because I think it's pulling it round a little bit. But if you've got one of those really heavy graphics cards, or I don't know, it's sagging a little bit, let's face it, we don't particularly like a bit of sag, do we? With GPUs, we like them to be nice and firm, nipple pointing up. That's the way we like it. And this is actually a really nice, simple way of doing it. It's the first time I've seen it included in a motherboard as well. Although, to be honest with you, I think this is the sort of thing that should come with your graphics card and have like a graphics card theme, and it be an extension of the design of the actual graphics card. I think there is a whole untapped market for this, and I think all of the vendors should start doing it themselves. Anyway, so that is how we would go about our testing. So get comfy, there's a lot to talk about. First of all, the M.2 down at the bottom with the little metal cover. Now, one thing I will say is we were using an MP500, which is from Corsair, and they can be a little bit on the warm side anyway. But with the M.2 cover, one of the things I will say is in normal use, they don't particularly get that hot anyway. So when you know, rendering and even doing the benchmarking that we have been, it's not something that gets particularly hot, and you may have got a degree or two of difference with the metal cover, but it's not an insulator, so that's definitely a positive thing. But even with the big bit of metal to help cool it, didn't particularly make a great deal of difference. If you start smashing loads and loads of consecutive crystal disc marks through, you can get them to the point of they get really hot. And that's really, it's almost like crystal disc mark. I can't remember which one it is, but one of the tests is worse than all the other ones, and that's one. I normally just run that specific one. I think it's the top one. Just run that specific one, and I keep running it. I have to sit there and babysit it and keep running it over and over again. Or you have a load of the windows open, and as one finishes, you're already starting the next one, so that there's less downtime. And you can get them to run quite hot. It's a shame that you can't just loop them in Crystal Dismark. But anyway, Crystal Dismark for solid state drives is a bit like Prime for a CPU. You can get it really hot. And at that point, you can drop the overall temperatures of your SSD. This one, you can drop it about 8 degrees. It depends on the kind of cooling and stuff that's going on in your case, but about 8 degrees, that's fairly good. Some of the add-on ones that I've done that you clip onto the SSDs, I have had those where in the same sort of scenarios, it's only been about 10 degrees. So there's a fairly close amount of difference. The good bit about this with the board is that if you've got a dual-sided solid-state drive, like what we have with the MP500, where they actually have chips on the back, you've not got to worry about, you know, fixing it and everything, because it just goes over the top. You get that nice bit of thermal pad, so you get a decent bit of contact. I know a lot of people say to me about, oh, do I take the sticker off my solid-state drive? It's not going to make a great deal of difference, and if I was going to advise you on it, I'd probably advise against ripping the sticker off and voiding your warranty. So you can keep all of those kind of things in mind as well. Also, I don't know whether you've noticed, but when you look at the system, and you saw it up close earlier on, you can't actually see that PCH fan because it's under the graphics card. So it's a very weird placement that it's so high, and most of us have got it, you know, you don't see very many single slot graphics cards anymore. So it is in prime slot to be covered. I'm not sure whether that's a design feature or not. Now, something that I was a little bit worried about with that is with some of the graphics cards that you can get that are slightly more open, and let's face it, they're open both sides. They're just designed to plumb or plow air at heatsink, and then they come out both sides. That could then mean that you're going to end up searing heat into the actual PCH. Now, normally with the PCH, the heatsink's slightly lower, but with that fan whizzing round, it's going to then pump your graphics card air in and around the board. So I have to admit, I'm not particularly a big fan of it. Now, I've tested it with a couple of graphics cards here, and it wasn't something that, let me put it this way, if you had it in a closed box with one of the graphics cards that could put in, you're going to be the type of people that are going to put it. And I ran out of time to literally change scenarios and put case doors on, and change graphics cards and lower fan temperatures for the do you know what I mean, to try and bring out that worst case scenario. But I'm sure there are going to be people that are going to find it annoying. The other thing was I couldn't find a way to turn it off. And it runs at about 1900, 2000 RPM all the time. Now, it's not noisy, and you can't see it, so it's not too much of a problem. But I just get to the point where I'm just like, really? Do you know what I mean? And I know that they're probably worried and that they're going to need a bit of extra airflow underneath there because they've covered everything in plastic. But I just think they could have maybe put it in a different place. I know that there's a lot of there's not a lot of room, on the board to be able to put these kind of things in. But maybe if there's not enough room to put them in, you then don't put them in a really silly place and you have a bit of a rethink. So I'm not saying it's, like I said, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and you would have to have a heck of a heaty graphics card to be able to make any difference to any stability with the board and everything like that. But the point still stands that if you've got a graphics card dumping hairdryer levels of heat into a fan, then the fan's just then going to be pumping that air to the warm parts where it might not have been sent in the first place. So it's something that I would have liked to have spent more time on. I didn't see any stability problems with my testing, but I've obviously got a closed card and most of the heat goes out the back. But you get the kind of point that I'm trying to make. It's probably something I should have spent more time on. But as you'll see, with all these extra tests that I've added in for the VRMs, which take hours, it was just something I was just like, whatever. So, yeah, don't really like the fan. So we'll just leave that at that. I know there are going to be a lot of people just literally throwing hoops now about the fact that I've, I should have tested it more, and it's going to overheat. It's probably not. It's just me being very clear and honest, and, you know, possibilities. But yeah, maybe I should have just, like, I don't know, moved the graphics card down. That's something you could do. Brainwave, light bulb on the top of my head. You could run the graphics card in the third slot and it wouldn't matter so much. Anyway, right, so VRM temperatures. So there's a lot of hype about VRM temperatures. If you've not seen my videos that I've done, because I did get some help from DeBauer, big props to him for working with me and walking me through the certain stuff. So the standard tests on this are with our standard tests, but in an extension from what I told you about my overclock tests are before. When we do the VRM tests, what you have to do is then go into the BIOS and turn the SVID off for the CPU. You have to go in and turn your current capability up to 140%, so that you, I would say so that you get better power control when you don't get the overcurrent problems. But as you'll see with this, when I did try and run 28 or 29 on this with the overclock in place, it was still shutting down. And I think that was still an overcurrent problem. Now the board, and I do need to make this very clear, and this is for or even the X299A that I did before, they are more than capable of delivering the power. There's a lot of people thinking that the VRMs are overheating because they're being worked too hard. They're not. The VRMs heat up because of the power that they're delivering. At that point, what you just need to do is cool them enough to keep them within kind of spec. So they do get hot unless you've got, you know, like a water cooler or a big heatsink or something like that on the top. But they're more than capable of delivering, you know, the 400, even 500-600 watts. You know, so they're well above. But it's just the fact that the heatsinks can not keep up. But the problem was, when I was running it on this, we were getting an overcurrent shutdown where it would just trip out and it would go off and stay off. Now that might be something that it might be a bit oversensitive to the power draw. It might be something that they're going to have to fix in the BIOS. I'm on the 0401 by the way. So it's going to be something that may change, but on the BIOS that I tested with, pulling massive loads, so the entire system draws over sort of like 475, 490 watts, that was when I was getting my shutdowns. With the A, what I did then when I was having these problems was go and turn SVID off and enable the power current to be 140%, and that absolutely solved my problems, but it didn't with this. But we did a lot of testing, as you can see in the graph. Now the OCCT is LinPack, all virtual cores enabled and 90% free memory. We run it for 30 minutes with zero warm up and zero cool down. The second one is the exact same test, but we tick the AVX button. And then the primes, you've got 26.6, 28.1 and 29.2. So there are three different versions of prime. 26.6 is closer to real world, and you can actually see with the amount of sort of levels that it's actually quite close to the sort of stuff that we can, the load that we can put on with OCCT in LinPack. LinPack is also the thing that they use in the Intel burn test as well, just to give you an idea of the kind of loads that it's putting on. Prime 28 and 29, they're the ones that really raise the bar, because that's AVX and AVX 512. So 512 is the latest version of Prime, which is 29, and the normal AVX is 28. They do put a lot more stress and a lot more load on the system as well. I could go into these and add even more data with the amount of power that they're drawing and all that sort of stuff, but we end up getting to the point where we're reviewing the programs rather than actually reviewing the boards. Now in the graph, if it says 0, basically what that means is it's either we had an overcurrent protection, which was what happened with them on the overclocks for the TUF, or they had a thermal throttle from the VRMs. So what happens with a thermal throttle from the VRMs is the CPU will drop back to 1200 megahertz. Just to give you a kind of a ballpark idea, with a 4.5 gigahertz overclock, if you hit, when we were testing these, if you get, the CPU will get hot first. So the CPU will probably be at 110 degrees in seconds. and then your throttling only goes down to about 3.3-ish gigahertz. The big, massive, like humongous drop in throttling is when the VRMs go, no, we're too hot, and it literally scales everything right back. So if we get, basically the way we're doing it is if the VRMs get to 105 degrees and throttle the CPU, we are declaring it as a fail. If the system shuts down because of overcurrent protection, we're also declaring that as a fail, because let's face it, we can't give you a result either. So for the TUF overclock, you can see that we've got the 2 zeros on that because that was a fail. The X299A overclock at the top, they're on zeros because that was actually a thermal throttle that we were getting from those, but the system carried on running. But one of the things I can say with this is, considering that the TUF has got that big bit of plastic across the top of the VRMs, it did better than I was expecting, and it does make me start to wonder whether that bit of plastic over the top maybe helps have like an airflow, sort of like ducting effect over the top of the VRMs and suck air through, which may have been ran more randomly otherwise. I don't know, but let's put it this way. I was genuinely expecting to be stood here right now saying it was much hotter than the X299A, because I thought that bit of plastic on the top was going to act like an insulator. I'm now happy to say it doesn't, and in certain scenarios it can even be cooler than the A as well. So, you know, those are all really positive things. Cinebench, we can blast through these. They're actually really similar when you break them down. The differences between them are, you know, very minimal. But when you think about it, the boards that we've done so far have all been Asus boards. Now, I know there's going to be people going, all Asus boards in the graphs. Well, when you think about it, I have actually done the MSI Lightning and the Gigabyte AMD ITX board, which have been reviewed. So yes, so far I have only done Asus X299 boards, but that was because the other vendors decided they wanted me to focus my time on other stuff, which is all kind of cool. So I do have some other boards from MSI and Gigabyte which are going to be coming up afterwards, but don't go thinking that this was my plan. This is just the way that the dice have ended up laying with the way that the reviews have gone. But this is going to mean that when we start doing the other ones, that we have a great deal of data, and I'm going to know whether there is a big step down or up compared to other boards, because we have quite yeah, anyway. So results and VRMs and all that sort of stuff, when we start doing the other ones, it is actually going to make it more interesting for me, even if not for you. So that, yeah, let's just not whinge too much about these bits. Blender, this is a new one. We've actually got a design that forum member Wraith made up for us, and he made it even idiot proof so that I can run it. So we've got this now, and it's quite easy for us to do, but it actually does give us quite a long run time to put the system under stress. And the fact that, as you can see, the 4K run, even with an overclock, was taking 20 minutes to run this, that it's quite a stressful test. So, you know, when we are going to be adding this into the reviews going forward. I've forgotten to add the X299A results into this, but we have done it. But anyway, so a 20-minute run with an overclocked CPU at 4K is going to be great, because like I said, this is actually going to give us some decent margins to be able to tell between the boards, and we'll be able to see, even with CPUs and stuff going forward, this could actually be quite cool for us. But then we do a little baby 1080p one as well, which can take, as you can see, like 5 or 6 minutes. Gaming, one thing I will say with gaming is it's obviously not a gaming platform, but we're going to assume that quite a lot of people are going to be gaming on them, at least at some point. But one thing I can say is look at the graph. There isn't a great deal between any of them. It really is incredibly marginal, and that is including, when you think about it, the difference between the stock and the overclock. So this is, again, something kind of like that we're going to really keep an eye on. I was certainly expecting a bigger difference with the overclock runs, but again, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll see how we go. We may even literally just be getting to the point where, especially with, I mean, we can't say that we're hitting bottlenecks as such with these, but we do them at 1080. And the thing with 1080 is, I mean, it could even be the point that the CPU is just so like with things that it's just we can't get any more out of the graphics card with it. I don't know. It's going to be something that we're going to have to watch. It's something that I will personally keep an eye on. But to be honest with you, I feel a bit like a juggling octopus at the moment with the amount of things that I am actively having to keep an eye on because of all this VRM stuff. If you go to the OC3D website though, we have added in even more tests. We've got a dedicated Hev C Benchmark that we're running now. So we're starting to bring in stuff that's more calculation based, which will not necessarily favour the Intel CPUs because that's not the way to do it. But when you think about the way that things are going with more cores, specifically when you think about the difference maybe between a, like, let's say for example, an i3 and a Ryzen 3, maybe, possibly. These are some of the reasons why we're starting to add in things that might utilise cores a little bit more. And again, I have to be very clear that I'm not doing this because Intel might have, you know, loads and loads of cores, but it's maybe down the lower end of the market where a couple of extra cores might actually make a huge difference. And if you then factor in something that it might be the same price or less money for more cores, you get where we're kind of going. So we're looking at these type of things because let's face it, HEVC is something, you end up with a file size at the end which isn't enormous. A lot of the quality is still there as well, and even I have been looking at these sort of possibilities for stuff that I do personally at home. So if I'm doing it personally at home, I think that there's going to be a lot of you that are going to be looking at it as well. So we're doing all those, adding some of those things in, and we're trying to mix things up a little bit for you as well. But one thing I will say is if any of you are interested in any specific benchmarks and you don't think that we're running them, or maybe we should give them a look, then head to the OC3D forums and just post in one of the sections. You won't be able to post in the review section because that's just for me to put stuff up. But, you know, put it in off topic or in one of the benchmark sections or something like that. Also, if you've tried to join the OC3D forums and you've not got your activation email, that's normally because your email provider has either blocked it or it's gone into spam. Go to the bottom of the website, there's a contact us button. All you need to do is put your username in and let me know that you've not got your activation email, and I will do it for you personally because those emails come straight through to my inbox. So yes, so if you're having any issues, then pop it in there and we'll go and we'll have a look. So the TUF award, we're going to give it the OC3D Enthusiast Award. To be honest with you though, we've given it the Enthusiast Award, but I more see this as being the base of a project or something like that. And you can, if you want, customise the plastic that goes over the top of the board. You can break out the paints if you want for a weekend project. That could be something that you could do really easily. One of the things you may have noticed is that the RGB is not on this at the moment. It is just in the middle of the board. And I think, to be honest with you, this would have been one of the few times where totally leaving it out would have been a better idea, because it was kind of a bit of like, it feels like it was an afterthought, while they've just gone, oh, RGB, we must have some RGB. Throw it, board, stick there. Yeah, use that. It just didn't work. So I wasn't particularly a great fan of that, if I'm honest. The fact that it's got all the hexagons all over the top of it makes me think straight away, hex gear case, it would absolutely sit perfectly in a hex gear build. And I'm assuming that Nate's going to get told that I've said this, and somewhere someone's going to go and buy one of these and put it in a hex gear build, and it's going to, yeah, all lovely, lovely. So I do like it, but like I said, there was a couple of things that didn't really sit very well with me. That really was that fan. They need to add at least something that they can turn it off entirely in the BIOS. I was, you know, doing sort of like dodgy tests where I was literally stopping it with blue tack, and I couldn't particularly see any massive like temperature differences and stuff like that. So yeah, do you know what I mean? It's a bit of a weird one. But the one thing I do have to say is I was expecting it to be loud, and I was expecting it to drive me nuts. And in all honesty, in a normal kind of user environment, not sort of like 3 o'clock in the morning, absolutely silent room, but in a normal kind of environment, I never heard it. So if I can't hear it over relatively low sort of fans in the rig when I'm doing the stock testing, then it's already done quite well. So it's a decent board. The VRMs have definitely surprised me because I expected them to be a lot hotter than they were because of all that plastic, and they weren't. So they've done a fairly decent job. One of the things that people have been saying about VRMs and this board specifically is about having a downdraft cooler going in to blow and cool the VRMs, and I would say, yeah, that would be a good thing. But the problem is none of the downdraft CPU air coolers are going to be able to keep up with the heat that your CPU is going to be producing at the point that you're going to need active cooling on the VRMs anyway. So what I would personally say to you is just focus on keeping the CPU itself cool, because that's the really expensive bit. And if you are getting to the point that the VRMs are going to be needing cooling, I'd be amazed if you've been able to keep the CPU cool enough that you would want to be running them for any length of time at that anyway. I normally say sort of about 80 degrees as an absolute kind of like upper limit for CPU temperatures. And to be honest with you, if your CPU's at about 80 degrees, even with custom water cooling, your VRMs are going to be well happy at that point. But if you've got custom water cooling, then just keep your eyeballs open, because I'm assuming that there's going to be an absolute flood of VRM heatsinks come to the market, or full cover blocks, so that you'll get a CPU and a VRM cooler in one. And if you want to be doing like days and days of prime testing or GIMP testing, if you use it for the Mars N stuff, then getting yourself a water cooler on the VRMs is going to be an absolute must. So plenty of information in there for you. Love to know what you would think. Cable tie technician, yes, Bosch, gone, this.